I am on 24 hours with no sleep and a prayer right now. And by prayer, I mean 2 12-ounce cups of however strong the strong option is on my low-end Keurig. It is spring Roundup time, and let me tell you, this spring was not quite as stacked as previous springs have been, but it was still pretty solid. A lot of weird shit this season, but there was also a good amount of good stuff as well, so just strap in. We're doing the thing. And hopefully, I don't pass out. Alright, first on the docket is My Hero Academia Vigilantes. Now, this is pretty dang fun for a spin-off. Especially in this first season, it doesn't go too far into anything in particular. But what it does do, I think, is pretty good fun. And by the time it gets towards the end, it starts getting pretty, properly emotionally compelling. Like I said, it's kind of mundane at first, but it also, I think that helps separate it from the main series. And there's still plenty of acts of heroism to go around, even if they're on a smaller scale. The existence of hero licenses implies the existence of folks who would go around using their quirks without authorization, without proper authorization, without going so far as being villains, right? So that's where I feel like this idea came from, and it really helps build the world of My Hero Academia in a way that would not be explored in the main series, which is already really cool. And I like that it stars just a regular-ass dude with a regular-ass quirk. Again, it helps keep it distinct from the main series. Like, Deku practically has a run-in with the hands of God in the first episode of My Hero, but Koichi is just a normal dude with a normal life and a normal quirk who just wants to do some good in the world, even if he has to do it technically illegally. And his quirk, he levels it up like any hero would, through hard work and understanding fundamentally how it works, and then he has big breakthroughs during emotional highs, right? I also like Pop Step, she's a fun addition. She has her own little rounded out arc within these 13 episodes that sort of ends with the performance at the new mall or whatever it is. And then add in Knuckle Duster, who starts off seeming like this kind of weird old guy who punches really hard and drinks beer a lot, but then has his motivations revealed as it goes on and more about his family revealed. You've got a fun little trio of vigilantes, right? I definitely appreciate that the main cast is small, again, differentiating it from the main series. But even the recurring side characters that come in as well, that are introduced over the course of this, they're not super important or anything, but I do think they're fun. And I also, just another fun thing, the addition of the Tsukauchi sister is quite clever. I really like that about this too. So overall, just a good bundle of fun, especially for a spin-off. When you're going into a spin-off, I don't think expectations necessarily run super high. You're just looking to delve a little deeper into the world you're already familiar with, and this does that beautifully. Also, just a side note, everyone constantly talks about how Pop Step is mediocre at singing, and Pop Step is voiced by Ikumi Hasegawa, who, right, she's not, even if she was trying, she's not mediocre at singing. She's not! Okay. Next up is Lazarus. On HBO, Max, and also directed by the director of Cowboy Bebop. I was wondering going into this why this had so much attention on it, even before it started. Now I know why. This is an original anime. We know how I feel about original anime, and guess what? Here's another one that kind of flopped. I just don't think this works on a fundamental level. It has a Netflix original kind of feel to it, and that is to say, it's directed and storyboarded and written like a Western TV project, which gives it a unique vibe among anime. And it's got great animation and music too, but that dope-ass animation kind of gets stunted after the first episode. Like, it's still good, but it's not as good as it is in the first episode, and the first episode has this really impressive sequence of the main guy, I forget his name, but he breaks out of jail and then is running away from the Lazarus group, the 4 people who are already in the Lazarus group. He's running away doing all this crazy parkour shit, and it's really well storyboarded and really well animated. Like, it's really impressive sequence. And it goes for like, it must go for like 7 or 8 minutes. If not, maybe a little bit shorter, I'm not sure. But it's really impressive, but it drags on, and it doesn't need to go for that long. It could have been like 2 or 3 minutes shorter, probably, and it would have established the same amount of shit. And it's this really impressive sequence, and it doesn't contribute to anything. We just know now that guy is really good at jumping across buildings and shit, and cranes and whatever else. And then it doesn't even amount to anything within the context of the episode, because dude just gets captured anyway when the blonde bombshell just comes in and does like the worst honey trap known to mankind, and he just gets fucking captured, and then he's roped into the Lazarus group, and that's it. Like, what a waste of an 8-minute sequence. And like I said, everything after the first episode feels at least a level lower in comparison. Like, fight scenes or anything of the sort where they really bust out that 3D animation, it feels like a step below. Like, they didn't try quite as hard with everything after the first episode. Like, they're still impressive, but it's just not the same. Like, I feel like the storyboarding especially is a level below, and maybe that's just because most of it's not parkour, especially like on the rooftops and shit, which obviously is a much more open space, but it just doesn't quite feel the same. And the characters are bland. They do nothing for me, and it never quite feels like they click all the way as like the main group. It sort of perpetually feels like they're all on different wavelengths. And this improves as it goes on, but it still never feels completely right to me. I guess it's sort of like Suicide Squad in that sense. And also the unraveling of the plot just feels so fucking strange. It's basically a big ass, stupid ass scavenger hunt that's supposed to lead to them tracking down the guy who created the vaccine for some big rampant virus. But he actually mixed in some kind of ticking time bomb of another virus into the vaccine, which is supposed to doom humanity. And the bro who did it, he's like, humanity is a plague to planet Earth. They can't be allowed to continue to run rampant and damage into the environment or whatever, which is like the most basic fucking reason to wipe out humanity anyone's ever heard of. But then, as the show progresses, it just kind of feels like the main cast do a bunch of random shit that has no bearing on anything else they do before or after. And, you know, maybe that thing they're doing at the time, whatever episode we're on, it may result in a slim chance of them getting their hands on, like, I don't know, the scientist's left sock, which might have a toe hair in it they could use as a DNA sample, and that's how they'll track them down. It just feels so disconnected, like completely disjointed. It's so strange. I don't like the execution of this very much. And because of that, it's hard to see the value in any of the individual things that they accomplish over each episode, right? Like, there are even some times where it tries to play into something deeper, like there's this one episode where they bring in some girl from the blonde girl's past, and like this other girl. Even after all of their like reminiscing and like going back and forth, it amounts to no meaningful character development that plays into the bigger picture. And it's just another forgettable story beat, and that's it. And the actual ending of the show was totally underwhelming. Like, it's just the most again, it kind of felt like a Suicide Squad thing. It was just a fucking underwhelming ass ending. Didn't do anything for me. And in that sense, it also sort of felt like it diverged from what it was supposed to be originally, because they got into this. The main guy has like a past of like getting fed some kind of drugs for a illegal experiment of some kind, and there was another, like, pretty much everybody from that experiment died, but there was one other guy who survived, and then he was fighting that guy. It's fucking weird. It wasn't the whole point to track down the scientist guy. What's his name? Skinner? Yeah, I'm gonna skin his dick off. This is just, it's a classic case of an original anime that doesn't have enough time to do both its plot and also make me care about it. Like, I'm pretty sure this whole plot could have been solved immediately if you just had Rainbolt analyze the video message that Skinner sent out at the beginning that said humanity was going to be doomed in 30 days or whatever. he would just looked at it and like looked at the trees and been like, I know where he is. Done. I didn't like this one very much. Can a boy and girl friendship hold up? No way. What's the fucking thing in parentheses? It says no way, no how. I don't fucking remember. This started off kind of grating, like irritating even. But I actually think it's overall a net positive if you actually persevere through it. I don't typically like to mention character designs. Pretty anime women are literally everywhere, but Himari and Rion I actually find to be particularly well designed and aesthetically pleasing. So that's a great way to catch your attention if you're not, if you're unfamiliar with this. And I do like the writing, generally. The characters work pretty well together, like the dialogue bounces off really nicely and freely, and the overly aggressive teasing between the main two is kind of a fresh change of pace for this sort of genre of high school rom-coms. And like I said, the dialogue, it's like fast-paced, they bounce off each other nicely. The dynamic between the main guy and Himari, which is the blue-haired best friend, quote-unquote best friend, and with Rion, the childhood crush who suddenly reappears in his life, is well established from pretty early on and serves to get this show's angle across pretty nicely. Because it's all about highlighting how real romance starts with basic friendship at the core, and the roses and rainbows type of thing can make you feel warm and fuzzy short term, but you still need to be friends at the end of the day, like really close friends with a strong bond if you want your relationship to last, right? That's what this show, I think, is trying to get across. And this show sort of illustrates that idea in an extreme, right? I mean, anime pretty much only does extreme. They never really hold back, but not the point. And also sort of related, it's interesting that the three main characters' older siblings have various history together from when they were classmates. It's dumb, right? Like, it would never happen in real life, but it successfully makes things a little more interesting. I also like the perspective this one offers on, like, creativity, like just making things, especially as, like, an individual for, like, a passion project. You know, I'm someone who sits alone and makes stuff for a living too, and when you create something, it's a reflection of yourself. Solitary creativity like the main guy does with his making accessories, it's not for the faint of heart. You push through the bumps in the road, because they're always going to be ups and downs, and sometimes it feels like the whole world's against you. There's like a whole plot point about that in the second half. It's cool. Now, like a lot of rom-coms, a good chunk of the drama here feels pretty contrived. Like, whoever wrote the story was really going the extra mile to shoehorn in some drama between the characters. And of course, there are plot points that are basically created as a way to inject drama into proceedings, like a means to an end, and have no real consequences to the overall plot. The stuff with Rion's older sister comes to mind at the end, where she just was trying to recruit Himari and eventually just gave up. Like, even though the main guy didn't fulfill his end of their little deal. Kind of dumb, but pretty much something you would expect in a show like this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Rom-coms are at their best when there are other goals or just general aspects of the characters' lives involved, and it's not just about the romance, right? Blue Box, take Blue Box as an example, my favorite romance show. It's not just the romance, there's also their sports, their respective sports, right? In this case, the accessory making business they're running is these characters' basketball and badminton, right? It sort of creates a more seamless medium that romance and drama can be channeled and developed through, while also making the characters much more well-rounded than they would be if it was just a romance. But yeah, overall fun. I thought the writing especially was quite good for what it was. Again, this really isn't my thing. It started out pretty rough, but I was won over by the end. It's kind of, it's kind of stupid. And I kind of like stupid shit, but yeah, take that however you want to. All right, the beginning after the end, there was a lot of hype around this one, and it seems kind of ordinary. Like, not bad, just kind of whatever. I'm guessing the real shit that it got people's attention happens later on. Because really, this is just a completely serviceable isekai with nothing remarkable about it, at least within these 12 episodes. In fact, it might even be below serviceable, because some of the fight scenes are clunky. Like, what does he do? Like, so he's an isekai, gets reincarnated has memories of previous life, knows how to read, so he masters magic from a really early age. Eventually he gets separated from his parents, meets an elf girl, becomes his best friend. We share the same Mushoku Tensei. The characters in this are, like, totally fine. Arthur's character arc, sort of his perspective on life changing so drastically from when he was king in his previous life to now, where he has, like, a family that he wants to protect and meeting a lot of the good people. I think that's pretty solid. And the other characters are just competent, like, whatever, who cares? But yeah, it's fine. It's completely serviceable isekai stuff. Like, I think the world building in this is acceptable as well. Like, not outstanding by any means, but I think it does a good job of just sort of establishing the rules of the magic and how Arthur is an exception to a lot of the rules, and the overall plot is sort of whatever. Doesn't really do anything for me. I guess we're looking forward here. We did get part 2 announced, so maybe we'll see the real shit starting then, but I don't know. This was just totally fine. What do you want me to say? All right, Mobile Suit Gundam GQuuuuuuX. This is actually pretty strong. I think I prefer this to Witch of Mercury, but it's very different. It's a wholly different vibe. I've had this feeling for a few years now about a lot of new manga and anime. They have characters that demonstrate this sort of weird postmodern type of framework, I guess we would call it. Like, they speak and act kind of like how I imagine an emo girl in her 20s feels, going around partying every weekend, doing random shit on a whim just for the sake of spontaneity, and having 3 flings at a time. Because that'd be what makes them feel like they have freedom over their life, or some BS like that, whatever. Shows like Chainsaw Man, Call of the Night, that kind of thing, have this same feel about them, and where the characters just kind of let their slightest whim influence a lot of what they do throughout the show, and they just exist on a constant emotional roller coaster, and even in the delivery of a good chunk of their, like, idle dialogue, they sound sort of disinterested or just generally disengaged from what they're doing or what they're talking about, like, sometimes even defeatist, and sometimes they just do mildly weird shit and go, oh yeah, dude, this is the life I've always wanted. It's a little bizarre to me, but I do think that approach, depending on the scenario and what type of show it is, can help the characters if it's done right, and I do think it's done right here. It's just sort of fits in with the universe, I guess. It's weird, but it does work here. Amate and Yan, I think, are pretty justified emotional roller coasters. The approach I just talked about, I feel like works here because they're really just normal girls who are born into this world where humanity's endured and put up with generation after generation of fucked up shit and oppression and large-scale violence and a sort of unfortunate middle ground between capitalism and socialism, kind of like us, right? But, like, seriously, this whole thing starts when Amate sees mobile suits blowing up shit, and she's like, hey, give me one of those. I'll fuck up all y'all. And even though she has no idea how to fucking pilot it. And it's sort of explained away with the Neo type, new type, Psycom, whatever garbage. But seriously, she actually would have just died in space if she wasn't a new type. That's the kind of, like, whim I'm talking about. She doesn't know how to pilot a Gundam, but she fucking sprints for one in the sewer or whatever in episode 1. And it's just like, you know what? I could drive this. You can't. She could, but how did she know that? She wouldn't have been able to do anything if she wasn't a new type with the advanced brain or whatever. But it's not a bad thing. It just feels strange to me. Like, it works, I guess, for this show, right? And the main two have dealt with and constantly deal with over the course of the show a lot of wild and wacky shit from all over the place. Granted, it's mostly their fault for involving themselves in all that, but still. I think Neon is more justified in her emotional turmoil, given how she has no family and is struggling just to live a semi-normal life even before the plot happens. Empathize with both her and Amate when they do all this crazy illegal shit just so they can go to Earth with Shuji, this dude they've met like 3 times who can communicate with Gundams apparently and like go search for some quote-unquote rose they know nothing about. I mean, I've just made it sound like the dumbest decision of all time, and there's no denying these two do a lot of dumb shit, but it's not like you can't understand them, so it's fine, I guess. But I do like the Amate and Nyan, they have a cool dynamic. Like they start out as sort of like apprehensive friends, then when they start crushing on the same weirdo because they think he's the only one who understands them, because he also trips balls while piloting a Gundam, they go way too hard on it to the point the tension just implodes and they get dragged onto opposite sides of the final conflict. It's kind of a cool story. Even the backstory with the Red Gundam's first captain and the new captain's motivation and stuff, I don't know, I think it works. The actual plot of this is a little too much, just too involved for 12 episodes in my opinion, but it's not poorly executed or anything, and I was able to follow along for the most part. I'll get into it in a bit, but it definitely keeps you on your toes, and there's some good twists and turns, and the pacing and general escalation of the plot, it was fine as well. There doesn't feel like there's much in the way of character growth, but I do feel like the narrative used the characters in a good way, if that makes sense. I don't want to get too deep into it, but regarding the stuff with the plot I didn't really like, I was reading the wiki, so I could at least try to sound like I was a competent anime reviewer, but turns out the Gundam universe might all be connected, meaning I might have missed some context from other Gundam anime. I've only seen this in Witch from Mercury. So I just gave up. But let's just say, in the context of just this show, it starts getting into alternate universes created by the unconscious mind of some character we meet like once, and big banged into existence by sheer Gundam energy or some shit. Anyway, it was weird, and that ending was weird too. I don't really think it actively solved much of anything, especially given what we learned about the alternate universes and stuff. A lot of characters that other characters said they wanted to kill are still alive, and Shuji might have been a hallucination all along. Probably. And you know what? The two main girls sure as hell made it to the ocean and saw the blue sky. And Amate got to kiss Shuji within the fucking sparkly tripping balls shit. So it all totally came full circle. Even though maybe the whole getting to Earth thing didn't really seem all that important to the characters throughout the show, as like a goal they were aspiring towards, but they did it. Other than that, animation was great, obviously. Battle scenes were really well choreographed and stuff, really cool. Yeah, this was a little strange, but mostly good. I don't know, if you like Gundam stuff. Anyway, shout out to Best Girl Komali and Suichan for the banger ending. I do believe this was her first time doing a song for a TV anime. It rips. Fucking banger of a song. Next up's Kowloon Generic Romance. Kowloon Generic... Whatever, I don't fucking care, dude. However you say it. I thought this was solid. I say solid, there's an asterisk, we'll get there. It spends the first episode just establishing its setting, like, really well, and thoroughly, and immediately gets you intrigued, and it keeps the intrigue high as it goes on. Like, it just makes you super curious what happened and how, right? Which is good. I also like the nostalgic art style in this one. It really helps, this whole show has a big nostalgia theme throughout it. Really helps get that across. The writing is good as well. The character dynamic is pretty fun. Overall has a more mature feel to it than most anime. The romance between the main two does kind of feel weird to me, just because as it's developing, we don't really understand the full scope of the mystery and how it plays into the two characters' pasts. Like there's even a moment where, like, after they fuck once, the dude was like, he essentially was thinking about the previous version of Reiko or whatever, who is maybe dead, whatever, and he feels like he's kind of cheating, even though it's the same girl. It's weird. It gets a little bizarre because, we don't understand the full scope of the mystery as it's happening, and, after they fuck, it's like, okay, great, they're a thing now, but then they're not a thing because the dude feels guilty about it, even though it's the same girl. I'm losing it. And it's also kind of interesting to see, like, the dichotomy, because we constantly see flashbacks to Reiko's previous rendition, previous personality, whatever you want to call it. It was sort of contrasts pretty heavily with how Reiko is in the present, which is kind of interesting. I do like them as characters, and I like the supporting cast. I think they're pretty solid too. Yao Mei in particular, I liked a lot. Gwen and Miyuki are plenty interesting as well. So there's a lot to like here. I don't know how I feel about the way the plot ended up actually going. A lot about it makes sense, but there's also stuff about it that comes down to the feeble volatility of human perception, which is to say there are things that don't really make sense. And the actual pacing of the mystery unraveling over the course of this feels strange in the sense that sometimes you just get a bunch of information dropped on you all at once, and then it goes back to being a little more mundane for a while. But then it has to kick the plot into hyperdrive for the last few episodes to get to where it wants to be by the end, which ends up making the whole thing feel really skewed to that side in terms of like actual important plot, which is weird. There's also a lot about what actually happened that's sort of intentionally left up in the air and unclear, so it almost doesn't feel right, you know? Like, and the ending is satisfying on a very surface level, especially for the main girl, Reiko, but it's weirdly unsatisfying in other ways, since it's kind of unclear what actually happens to the main guy, Kudo, and some other characters, what actually becomes of them after things are resolved. Overall, I think this could have been more balanced in terms of pacing and plot execution, but the nostalgic feel about it really does set it apart from other anime. I'd say it's worth the watch if it seems interesting to you, but if you don't care, then yeah. I thought it was good for the most part. Has a nice feel to it. Next up is Please Put Them On, Takamine-san. God, this is dumb. This is... Woo! I'm almost not sure how to feel about this because it's not like the premise is terrible, really, and the dynamic is fairly well established from the off. Like, it builds nicely over time, too. Even the writing really isn't that bad. But this whole thing is just... you know... let's just say it walks a fine line and leave it at that. But overall, this really isn't bad. I don't have much criticism to offer. It was exactly what it advertised itself to be. It was unabashedly weird and horny, and a lot of fan service to go around. But it's not like the main two are like totally bland characters, so they kind of make it work. They're not the greatest characters or anything, but they're not totally one-dimensional. Like, it builds the relationship between the two of them pretty sensibly, given the premise and the established dynamic between them, including their shared past and all that. It's mundane, but never feels too boring. I don't know. Kind of feels like they did nail what they were going for. Somehow the final point of conflict being the intervention of a guy who really wanted to touch Takane's feet feels really fitting for this one. This sure was a show. Alright, from Old Country Bumpkin to Master Swordsman. This is alright. Nothing really negative to say about this, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed other shows of this style from previous seasons. You know, that being the dad thinks he's kind of washed up, but is actually crazy strong, and a bunch of ladies 20 years younger than him are very into him fantasy genre. Obviously. This show kind of feels like it gives the illusion that it's busy and doing stuff with the plot, but by the end, it feels like it accomplishes less than other shows in this genre do. Like, you know when you're in like a randomized dungeon in a video game, whether that's your Dark Craters or your Tartaruses, what have you. You go in and you're going around, picking up a bunch of items, racking up experience, maybe even find a secret or two, but like 30 minutes later, you realize you're only on the 3rd floor up, and the first few floors are actually just really big. So it felt like you were doing a lot, but you actually haven't made a lot of progress. That's what this show feels like. Like, there's still some fights against big monsters, sparse cute moments with some of the ladies, stuff you typically see in the more easygoing fantasy show like this. But it doesn't really feel like it does anything truly significant at all in any aspect. Characters are fine, but mostly feel kind of flat, even the main guy. Like, there's just nothing actually notable about any one of them. And even the sword fights themselves do basically nothing except recycle the same finish for every single one, including the final climactic sword fight with Rose. Like, he just does the wait for the center slash or whatever, wait for a straight jab and kind of swipe it to the side and get in close. He does that like every single fight. That's a master swordsman for you. But the 3D animation in this I found to be pretty solid. I've seen some fucking terrible 3D animation over these past few years doing these roundups, but this ain't it. It's actually blends in surprisingly well. So overall, this was fine. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been better though, but it definitely could have been worse. There's nothing about it. I will not remember these characters though. So bland. Next up, a ninja and an assassin living together. This was kind of surprising in a good way. At its core, it's still one of those like silly sitcoms with a wacky premise, and it manages to avoid becoming stale by doing a bunch of weird shit with that premise that are sometimes hit or miss. And it has that writing style you see a lot in this kind of show, where there's not really a dedicated clown and a straight man, but both of the main characters can play either role depending on the situation. And they have very different personalities, so their dialogue bounces off each other really effortlessly in an inherently funny way. But at the same time, instead of introducing a bunch of new wild and wacky characters to spice up the formula who like stick around for the duration of the show, it does the One Punch Man thing, where they bring in characters who on the surface look like they would stick around because there's a bunch of small details about their design and weird little quirks they have that kind of gives the illusion that like, oh, look at this character who's going to stick around. But instead they just die immediately. Like actually just die. The assassin girl Konoha just kills them. And that's it, right? So it keeps the amount of characters who actually do stick around very limited, which is actually a good thing in this case. It ends up being the whole point of designing all these really distinct characters was to just have them die, which is funny in its own right, you know? But it also uses that to play with your feelings sometimes, which surprised me, because it still does a bunch of off-the-wall shit that makes no sense like you'd expect from a show like this. But then it also has times when, you know, just for example, it brings in a character who's a childhood friend of the assassin girl's only real friend in school. So there's like a friend of a friend here. This girl, the friend of a friend, has high marks on her medical school practice exams, hoping to become a doctor in the future. She's introduced, the assassin girl meets her, and then like 2 scenes later, she has a hit on her. You know, not the doctor girl gets the hit. The future doctor gets a hit on her. You know, sent straight to the assassin's like assassination app. It's like, kill this girl and we'll pay you. And instead of making a big schmoz about it, the assassin girl just kills her, the future doctor, and that's it. And the assassin girl's really only friend in school, that future doctor, was her childhood friend. So we see the assassin girl's friend from school handing out missing person posters of the girl the assassin girl just killed. My God. Again, this has a sort of typical story you'd expect from a wacky sitcom like this. Like, over the course of all the highs and lows, the third-degree murder and other general shenanigans Konoha and Satoko go through together, they become more attached and dependent on each other than they realize. You know, Satoko realizes she can't keep stagnating. She tries to get stronger, which ends up kind of going kind of poorly for her. And then when Konoha goes away for a bit at the end to earn money for Satoko's medical treatment, the separation makes them realize how much they like having each other around on a personal level. And, you know, in the last episode, Konoha comes in at the last moment to save Satoko during a perilous encounter, and they live happily ever after, killing people for money. Yeehaw. But yeah, it's mostly that, you know, off-the-wall, silly shit that with, you know, sitcom kind of thing. Nothing really plays into the next thing for the most part. And, you know, things that happen do carry over to the next episode, right? But for the most part, it's just a goofy sitcom. But it has its moments, right? Like, let's say you're playing an RPG, it's just like happy little fun, little fucking game where you adventure around this bright, colorful world. You know, you give goblins a smackdown all day long, these goofy little characters. The main story is pretty much super predictable, and you kind of have a feeling how everything's going to go down from really early on. But then sometimes, when you fight boss monsters, they just die way too easily, and you're kind of feeling let down about it. And then there's that one side quest where you watch some NPC's family member die in front of you, and it's this like surprising takeaway about grief and pain while maintaining the strength to keep on living. But that quest has absolutely no bearing on the main game. That's what this show feels like. All right, the Brilliant Healer's new life in the shadows. You know, I feel like the crazy, overpowered guy gets kicked out of his high-ranked party and now wants a slow life fantasy genre of anime. Might be overstaying its welcome a bit. But the show isn't bad at all. It's fine. This is one of those shows that doesn't prioritize plot or even world building much. It really focuses more on its characters and just kind of having them hang about, just existing, you know? Like, yeah, like it has stuff that happens that's, you know, I guess plot related, but you just kind of know it's going to end exactly the way it started. So I'd say I did enjoy watching this one, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it anything beyond just good or just enjoyable, you know? And there's totally a place for that kind of thing, right? Like, totally. Those kind of shows aren't my favorite thing, but there's totally a place for it. Like, the characters are perfectly fine. They have a pretty fun dynamic between them, so it's fairly enjoyable even just watching them exist, right? I also like how it handles the sort of dealing with the feud between Zenos and the mean guy who kicked him out originally of the party when the golem thing happened and all that. So it again, it has some good things about it. And it actually does do a decent amount in the second half with that little academy arc, right? I don't think it's anything particularly good in comparison to other shows of this style, but it does help change the flow and feel of it, which is a good thing, instead of just stagnating. And there's even some halfway decent lore and a cool twist towards the end that helps shine a bit more light on a mystery from earlier on in the show. Yeah, I mean, it's really not bad at all. Like, I'm not gonna remember these characters really, but I did think they were enjoyable to watch. So, a perfectly acceptable fantasy. Slow life, fantasy, overpowered man, kicked out of his party or whatever. It's fine. Alright, I'm the evil lord of an intergalactic empire. This is so dumb. And I kind of like it. This is by the author of Trapped in a Dating Sim. So you kind of get the feel for it, I guess. It's got the same style of humor. This actually really heavily leans into the dumbness and the gimmickiness of the humor, and like the setup of the actual isekai that happens of Liam being reincarnated from his life where his wife cheated on him and all that into his new role as like the count of the planet or whatever, you know, being in charge of some backwater planet. Just really focusing in and like absolutely zoning in on that weirdness it allows all of the potential humor to come through. I actually think this was a good approach to it. Like the weird bits they do with the guide constantly that just kind of exist separately from everything else are kind of a good example of that. It just leans into the weirdness and gimmickiness of it for the sake of humor, which again, I think is the right approach for this one. I did think the humor lands for the most part, but overall, it's kind of just like, it's kind of fun for what it is, but it just leaves you with this feeling like, when it's over, it's like, oh wow, that sure was a show. Like, it takes its time with everything it does, and it establishes all the dynamics pretty well. And the couple of episodes they spend fighting the space pirates are fairly fun. You know, I even think that emotional stuff with Amagi in the last episode, it's not half bad. But nothing Liam ever does really contributes to any bigger picture, which is fine. And I'm sure a lot of folks out there like that kind of switch your brain off type of show a lot. And this is definitely that. Like, it's a lot of silliness about it. The Way of the Flash comes to mind. There's a lot of weird silliness about it that this show just kind of makes its own. So, for that, I can't fault it. I thought it was alright. Again, it really takes its time. Like, I don't even think it went past volume 1 of the light novel. Surprising. Alright, Once Upon a Witch's Death. This is actually pretty nice. I like this one. I think the main character, Meg, is such a delight. Like, what a gift. This has an interesting setting. It's like a modernish world with magic and witches implemented into like kind of normal modern society. Maybe a little bit, 20, 30 years ago, which kind of leads the story in a different direction than I was expecting. I was definitely ready for like a lot more of a emotional roller coaster with like Meg going around to various people and places to help solve problems or deal with grief or what have you, so she could collect her joyful tears that she needs. But I don't mind the direction it went in either. It actually focuses more on Meg developing as a witch. She does still collect her joyful tears, but a lot of it especially in the latter half, we just don't see, which is fine. I don't mind that. She deals with a lot of very different things throughout these 12 episodes, and it helps her develop as a magic user. Like, she comes into her own as a person throughout her various ups and downs, like, and her magic develops with her. It's cool. Maybe it feels like the development of her magic takes kind of big leaps sometimes, so it doesn't feel like steady growth or that she's necessarily earned it all the time. But those jumps happen alongside big emotional plot points, so I can forgive it, you know? But yeah, just watching Meg interact with all the other characters is great. Like, it's heartwarming to see her create new connections, like with Sophie, that one hot, the one hot girl, the 7 mage girl, who may or may not be old, Chloe, Serena, that whole shebang. Like, it's got great sense of world building too, and Meg going around doing good deeds little by little and like earning the respect and recognition of her hometown and eventually like basically the whole witching industry. It's pretty nice. Like, it's a nice escalation of everything. You know, maybe it feels a little bit rushed or a bit contrived sometimes, but it's fine. Like, I did like how it went. And I think the ending of this leaves Meg in a good place as well. So yeah, overall solid, enjoyable stuff. I hope there's more of this. I did like it. Meg is she's great. She's such a good lead. Very, very charismatic. I like her a lot. Next up is the Shiunji family children. This is actually not even that bad. It's not really good either, but it's like a kind of completely paint by numbers harem. The protagonist here is actually surprisingly straight-laced and serious, and he's perfectly capable when it counts, and it totally makes sense for him, you know, in a believable way. You know, he's capable in a very believable way. Like, there are some other protagonists in this sort of harem genre where they're like total losers, but then they randomly become ultra determined and sometimes super strong out of nowhere, that in a way that seems almost out of character. You know, like when the plot demands it, or when there's an opportunity to win over the affection of a woman in the show. But for this guy, it doesn't feel forced at all. Those moments feel completely in character for this guy. Like, he has the sort of background and upbringing to back up all the cool moments he has. You know, a lot of the dramatic moments are with one-on-one with each of the different girls, and they play into what each of the girls is all about. Like, the main talking points would be for this season would be between 4th and 3rd, Minami and Oka. I'm a genius. But yeah, it really plays into like their characters and what they're all about. So I like those dramatic moments. They're really not that bad at all. And on that note, maybe it's a bit forced, but it does sort of feel like our guy here does earn the affection of his not sisters, right? For the most part. Like, especially in Minami's case, and a little less so in Oka's case. Yeah, I think he totally, you know, he does enough to make it make sense. Although it is kind of weird for the youngest, Kotono, who just admits that even when she thought the dude was her brother, she was in love with him. And they never really explore that part of her character further, so we just kind of have to stew the whole season with that strange knowledge in the back of our minds, which is weird. Like, yeah, it's weird that they started out as siblings as first and then turns out they're not siblings, but I honestly don't think it's handled in a way that comes off weird, I guess, aside from Kotono, right? Like, at least as a viewer, you know, our perception, right, we kind of go in understanding that they're not blood related, right? At least, I guess I think Shu and Minami are actually twins or whatever. But for the most part, all of them are not blood related. And we kind of go in as a viewer knowing that. So even though their perception of everything gets shaken up, ours doesn't really. So I don't think it really feels that weird with the whole potential incest thing. Because, I mean, we never... At least for me as a viewer, I never believed they were actually related, so I didn't have that preconception going in. But yeah, other than that, it really doesn't do anything spectacular or even out of the ordinary. It's just completely unremarkable. And ironically, by being mediocre and leagues better than Rent-A-Girlfriend, which is by the same author, it becomes forgettable. Like, we all remember Rent-A-Girlfriend for being unbelievable dog shit. And this one was much, much better. but I will not be remembering it much after this. Well, except for the thing that happened at the very, very end, like that final text on the screen. That got a good laugh out of me. Also, Bonri made me feel more in like the 2 episodes she was focused on than Chizuru ever has. It's like when Miyajima puts more effort into a character, they're actually less effective. Kazuya. What? Alright. Rock is a lady's modesty. Just when I thought ladies rock band anime couldn't get angrier than Nina in her little jester outfit, this show comes and shows up. I guess being elegant all day really represses the inner rage. What do I know? But nah, this is great fun. The contrast between the ladylike elegance the main characters uphold in their daily lives at this like high-class all-girl school, and then the insane technical skill and brutality of the girls' instrument playing is so fun right off the bat, and like the crazy trash talk between the main two is just it's fucking awesome. Like them like riding the high of their adrenaline. It's really funny. I like it a lot. And I really like how it handles their budding friendship. And besides that, I also like how it handles the prince girl, I forget her name, blue hair, who's learning how to play keyboard with them as sort of like an amateur musician. And then the bassist girl, who's a fun little addition as well. They've all got very different outlooks on everything, except for the main two, they're kind of similar, but like they all sort of get swept up in the whole raw passion thing that their band tries to do, right? They all get swept up in it. It's really well conveyed. And even outside of that, there's some other interesting elements, like with Lisa's mom, Twin Tails, blonde Twin Tails, her mom being all weird and creepy and shit, and like, not approving of the whole guitar thing. Like, it makes you intrigued, like, because Lisa wants to become, whatever, top lady or whatever the fuck it is, so she can sort of redeem her mom's name. It kind of makes you curious what happened to make that a problem in the first place, right? Because we don't learn over the course of the season. So I am curious about that. So there's some elements outside of just the rock band stuff, so that's good. The 3D animation is really good throughout this, and the music is super well made too. Like, it really conveys that raw passion I mentioned that they're trying to go for. Like, their whole thing is that they don't have a vocalist, and they still win over audiences with their really just overtly passionate performances. This has a lot of the usual themes you'd expect in a rock anime, like not giving a shit about what other people think and all that. But the way they do it is, again, I mentioned this girls band cry. It's unique to this particular girls rock band show. Add another to the list. This one still feels unique to all the others. I really like what this one has going on. I don't think it's quite as emotionally compelling as Girls Band Cry or even Bocchi, but it does have its own identity, and it's all the better for it, right? Like, it doesn't copy and paste anything from other shows that are similar. Yeah, I thought this was a really solid, it kind of makes me want to groovy out with my pussy out. I don't know, they always talk about rocking out with their cock out. I just kind of want to Uno reverse it a little bit. I don't know if it worked or not. Next up is your Forma. Man, this one's been on the radar for a while, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I do believe I was hoping for something better than this. Apparently, this starts with the second volume of the light novel, which is absolutely diabolical. So we skip all of the establishment of the world and the setting and the characters and just jump into cybertech mystery solving with not a lot of context. Really strange choice. And because of that choice, it just goes right into the first mystery without us really being able to fully digest what we've learned about the world so far and how everything works. So when they're divulging all the details about the first mystery in episode 4 or whatever, a lot of it sort of flew over my head because I was still not entirely sure what half of the jargon they were speaking meant. So it feels way too fast paced to make anything really stick like it should, at least in the anime. And even besides that, right, speaking of this anime adaptation in particular, it does the typical light novel adapted to an anime thing where it just has to totally cut out a lot of the smaller details and set pieces that really fill out the world and characters, so that this feels almost more like a bare minimum adaptation, right? And most light novel adaptations They're almost always primarily just for exposure to sell the light novels. But I do feel like this one actively suffered more than most light novel adaptations just because the world seems so detailed and very like deliberately crafted in this show. And that didn't really come across as well as it could have in this, I think. I've never read the light novel, but so I could just be talking out of my ass, but fuck. The mysteries themselves are fine, but specifically the second and especially the third are pretty solid. The third plays into Harold's past, and Harold being unbound by the like fundamental laws of respect or whatever that the androids of his model have to follow all the time that like keep him from attacking humans. It makes him pretty interesting. I think the main girl Echka is a pretty much paint by numbers loner detective type. But the dynamic between those two, it's all right. I'm sure Echka's more interesting than she seems here as it goes on, you know, in the novels specifically. But I do wish her ability to like brain dive or whatever actually played more into the bigger picture. It's treated more like a convenient tool for the plot than anything else here, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, this is okay. You know, it would not have had time to do anything if it spent more time on the smaller details and set pieces, right? It's a shame, but I do think this will probably encourage folks to pick up the light novels if they're interested, because I'm sure it's easy to tell that there's more to this than the anime gets across by itself, right? And I think that's probably just the way to go. Like, maybe just, if you're trying to get into this, just don't even with the anime and just go straight to the light novels. Or maybe the manga. I heard the manga's better too. What do I know? All right, the too perfect saint tossed aside by my fiancé and sold to another kingdom. This is actually cute. Like, it has pretty decent world building for what it is, and the plot really isn't that bad either. You know, it's all pretty much one story arc, and it resolves by the end. So that's a winner in my book. I think Philia is a really solid lead for this. She's kind of a different type of lead than you'd expect in like a show like this. She's not a villainess, but you know, where she was manipulated by someone or other and thrown out to a new place. She's more of the reserved, cold type. A lot more of the cold, reserved type. But she opens up as it goes on, right? Like, you totally understand why she is closed off from others due to, like, her upbringing. And you're, like, having Mia in the original kingdom while Philia is in the new kingdom. And Mia's, like, scheming ways to get revenge on the second prince who manipulated Philia and sold her off. To contrast with Philia's, like, much more genuine connection with the people in the new kingdom. I think that works really well too. It's a cool dichotomy they have. It really makes for an interesting back and forth between the two as like the show jumps between each one. I like that about it. And with that back and forth, right? Like the new kingdom under Philia's care is actually prospering a lot more. And the old kingdom where Mia is sort of just at the, you know, scheming and at the behest of that corrupt second prince is starting to just go to shit, right? So it makes the dichotomy even better. Like, I even think Mia's scheming in itself is kind of interesting. Like, she's working with the sickly crown prince to sort of create a plan. I think is good stuff. It's well thought out. The plot of this is kind of a slow burn, but it works to help, you know, raise the stakes and move everything forward. And by the time it escalates to the last few episodes, I was pretty much totally invested, actually. It really takes its time with the important plot points and even takes the story farther than I would have expected by the end of it. Every character serves their purpose pretty well, and like every character serves their purpose well, and it does a good job of making us root for both Philia and Mia over the course of it in different ways. I really like those two. They have a really sweet thing going. I even like the supporting cast as well, although the Exorcist duo kind of felt shoehorned in. And the second prince of the original kingdom, the manipulative bastard one, might be the most easily hateable bastard in one of these kinds of shows. He's such a dick. The romance in this between Philia and the second prince of the new kingdom, it's not half bad, but it's far from the best thing about this show. But it does work, despite Philia's colder nature, because it helps her open up, because he's like a golden retriever type or whatever. So I think it works in that sense. The lore with Asmodeus, the demon involved in the final conflict, it doesn't really feel all there for me. So the whole final conflict doesn't work, I think, as well as it could have. Like, you know, we know kind of a bare minimum. Like that guy Asmodeus was like in love with a saint from a very long time ago. That didn't quite land as well as it could have for me. But yeah, overall this was cute. I did like it. I really like that it's one story arc and not multiple. All right, Teogonia. This is kind of bizarre to me. It feels weirdly directionless. Like there aren't a lot of shows where I'm just like, okay, but what's the point? But this is one of them where things just happen. I'm like, okay, but why? I really don't understand what this show wants to do with itself. It's pretty all over the place. Because like the first major thing we learn about is the divine crests or whatever in regards to like the world building. And they're supposedly granted to people who are chosen by the land or something to watch over and protect a certain place or something to that effect, right? So we're under the impression that it's a pretty important and special thing that's only granted to a select few people. But then apparently, we learned later, it can also be gained just from training and being real strong. So it's not as special as it seemed. The main guy, he also gains the ability to use magic just by visualizing what he wants to do, which may or may not be related to the fact that he got the Divine Crest. Not sure. It's not really ever made totally clear. And he uses magic to an extent nobody else in the world does. And in that, you know, on that same note, the main guy has like vague memories of a life on Earth. So it's potentially an isekai, which is weird. It's never explained away, so we don't know why that is, how it happened, whatever. It just sort of exists, and we have no idea who the main guy was in his previous life or anything. For example, he just has memories of like cells. You know, this is the setting is sort of pre-technology. It's very like older. No one would have knowledge of cells in that universe. But the main guy's like vague memories of how cells work and how they make up everything. He uses that to help his magic visualization. Like there's this one moment where he's fighting some big orc boss and he's like, all right, check this out. I'm gonna visualize a magic that splits apart your cells and disintegrates you. I bet you stupid fucking orcs don't know what cells are, do ya? Stupid fucking idiots. And then he just wins. That's exactly what happens. He disintegrates him. It's weird. I don't get it. Why? Why have the memories? That's all it amounts to? Just some weird magic he uses like twice. And there's some other weird shit about this. Like, there's some little guys that show up in the valley that our main guy is supposed to protect with his divine crest or whatever. And they're there because some orcs drove them out of their last home, the spot where they were living. But then they just stay there. That's really all they do, except maybe like kind of help out once or twice later on. Sort of. Like, I get the main guy's motivation, right? Like, he wants to be stronger so he doesn't die without making a name for himself first. And he does have defining character moments. Like, one that comes to mind is when he stands up against that one monk fella, or whatever he is, who's trying to get him to stop protecting the little guys in the valley and use his power only for humanity's benefit. And he's like, no way. Those little demi-human guys are super cool. And the monk nearly kills him for that. There's even a little arc of him doubting the powers that be and why he was granted this power that he has. And it seems like, it seems to him that it only destroys instead of heals when he truly needs it, which he eventually overcomes that doubt. So it's not like he's a bad character or anything. I just feel like none of that actually contributes to a bigger picture. So it just kind of feels like it's there. And then, there's also that one girl with the white hair in this show. She just kind of spends the entire show pointlessly fighting the patriarchy. Like she's trying to prove women can fight too, instead of just being in the kitchen. But instead of proving that she can fight, she just kind of complains about it a lot. Like, oh man, why won't anybody let me fight? And, I know it's deeper than that, because a lot of people tell her she can't fight. People with power, like, don't fight. But she still could have done it. Anyway, this is fucking weird. I don't really get it. I just don't understand why anything. Maybe I'm the dumb one. Monkey brain idiot. I don't get this one though. All right, the unaware Atelier Meister. This one's heart is in the right place. You know, I've talked before in previous roundups about shows that are built upon misunderstandings. That's a big part of like the dynamic between the characters. This one uses that in a kind of unique way. Like you sort of understand why nobody around the main guy wants to tell him he's actually cracked out. You know, because he probably won't believe them just because of how naturally humble and self-critical he is. But it still has that weird vibe throughout the show, because literally anything bro makes is on his worst day worth 10 times more than market value, and on a better day he makes regular ass bread that's harder to pierce than orichalcum. That's cool. Good for him. I think the characters are fine. Like nothing to write home about, nothing spectacular, nothing even you know, remotely notable. But they work for what the show is. It feels weird that basically the entirety of like the planning and strategy goes on behind the main guy's back. It's all like the supporting cast doing it without his knowledge. Like the warrior lady and the princess are like constantly scheming about how best to position the main guy without him ever getting too involved or too out there, so that the least amount of people possible even find out about his existence. And also, he doesn't figure out how cracked his skills are. But again, it does make sense, and it's not like it's poorly put together or anything. It's just kind of serviceable. It's just fine. Like, I'll admit, it does have at least a small amount of that, like, warm, fuzzy feeling you get with these kind of more casual anime that don't carry as much stakes, and, you know, it's especially prevalent when there's, like, a daughter figure in the mix. But yeah, like, overall, I wouldn't call this one bad. It's just fine. Like, I don't think anyone would seek this out unless this is your thing. Like, this is the kind of show you like more than other shows. Like, I've covered a ton of other shows on previous roundups that have this exact same kind of vibes, and some that do it better. But this fits right in with those other ones. It's fine. Whatever. All right, the Gorilla God's go-to girl. This is actually really wholesome, really cute. Sophia and Luis, they totally won me over. I don't usually get won over by pairings, like specifically romance, but these two, they got, I liked them. I don't think this is anything to write home about in any category, really. The plot is just kind of serviceable, and the characters are pretty much just decent. But I do like the dialogue writing, the setting too. You know, it's got all that, the animal god blessings and such. I think it's fun stuff, like it gives the characters a certain distinctiveness from each other, which is good, right? But the characters are pretty much totally lacking in backstory and motivations. You know, just as an example, the main girl, Sophia, there's a couple times where she mentions how she's lacking in self-confidence during her inner monologues. We don't really know why that is. Like, she just kind of has a poor self-image. And that's totally normal, right? Like, I'm sure all of us have had self-confidence issues at some point. But for Sophia, since that doesn't tie back to anything in her past or whatever, there's just not as much to her character as there could be. That's just one example. But she does have a nice arc that sort of starts with her hating how freakishly strong she is, blessed by the gorilla god, but then comes around to her realizing how much of a gift it is and how much she's been able to do because of it, how many people she's been able to help. So that's nice. I think it's a good little arc for her. I also like the supporting cast. They feel very authentic for the most part. And even the girl who bullies Sophia and her squad of bullies actually come around to being cool within the first half of this. So that's nice. It's a nice change of pace. The romance is actually what won me over. It's very sweet, very wholesome. And they even managed to like make a good excuse for Sophia to confess to Luis pretty early on, which makes the romance going forward way cuter. I really like how they handled the romance here. So a lot of this show feels refreshing for this kind of genre of shoujo. And it does have its plot it has that weird overarching thing with Daybreak, who are like the anti monarchy faction or whatever, who planted a bomb in one episode, or maybe carried over to two, but it was led by Leohart, I think his name is. And he hates the idea that his life was decided. He was born into a noble household, but he hates the idea that his life was basically decided for him based on the luck of the draw and what god he was blessed by. So that's cool world building, right? It's nice to know that not everyone just accepts it as is, right? There are people who are sort of rebelling against that system, even if these guys do it unsuccessfully. So yeah, this one was pretty good. Definitely not bad at all. I found it enjoyable. Next up is Apocalypse Hotel. This is not bad at all. It's one of those anime that just kind of does its own thing. You know, on the surface, it's got like this seemingly innocent concept with silly characters and silly writing, but has a pretty obvious melancholy hanging over it, because it's all about this hotel run by androids and robots that are waiting for humanity to return to Earth after they abandoned it, after the environment went kaput, right? So, you know, we see a bunch of aliens come visiting the hotel. It's a little all over the place, but in a fun and cute kind of way. But like, this show is one of those for people who like the more contemplative, slower paced anime that don't make their intended message obvious, and they leave it to your personal interpretation. Like, it's obvious that this show has something deeper that it means to get across, but what that actually is and how you digest and understand it is totally up to you. It delves into specifically Yachio's memories of the hotel owner from before humanity left Earth, which helps spur her on despite how hopeless she feels, and also help her see the reasoning behind all she's doing to help different characters throughout the show. So I like that about it too. It's a nice human element of it. And you know, this post-apocalyptic world we see, like a lot of dystopian or post-apocalyptic fiction, it's obviously meant to be a culmination of humanity's mistakes. And then these little androids in the hotel persevere in spite of all of it. And their dealings with various aliens and destructive robots are just the silly shenanigans that sort of hide the deeper implications of the like environmental storytelling and everything. And in the end, it's Yachio's good memories of the owner's idealism that keep her going through it all, so it highlights the good and the bad of humanity. But, you know, I don't know, this really isn't for me, but I do think it's well done. It's pretty creative, like nothing was off the table in the writing room for this. It's original, right? So like a lot of weirdness got the green light here. The writing's good, visuals are pretty strong. It's got great attention to detail too, like with the environmental storytelling, and you know, just a lot of kind of seemingly meaningless shots during scenes that just sort of parody the history of humanity in the same way that political cartoons might. They might get a good chuckle out of you, and you know, they last like for one second. Another interesting thing about this show is that it spans a very long time, like multiple centuries of the hotel just kind of hanging in there, which gives it even more chances to do stuff that just make you reflect on life or get emotional or what have you, while keeping up the surface level silliness in fresh new ways. Like, for example, there's that one episode where Yachio gets stranded in space, and then the next episode, it's 50 years later, and the Tanuki girl has grown up and running the hotel in Yachio's absence, but then when Yachio makes it back, everything is super different from how she remembers. She's a fucking meltdown, and there's that kind of surprisingly rad mech fight scene. That's the silliness at play, right? But it does have some deeper takeaways you can glean from it, all about, you know, passage of time and change being unavoidable and all that. That's the kind of stuff I mean. There's a lot of that kind of thing in this show. This kind of reminds me of Nier Automata if it was like a sitcom. Which feels weird to say, but that is kind of what it feels like. But yeah, this was alright. It's, again, not really for me, but I do think it's nicely put together. So, next up is The Dinner Table Detective. I think this is pretty fun, actually. There's the unique dynamic between the main girl and the butler fella. I think it's quite funny, actually. And even the detective dude, his shenanigans, I thought were fun to watch too. All of the cases are pretty well thought out and have good variety between each one. Even if maybe they're a bit contrived sometimes. And I don't really get how the butler always gets the solution, even though half the time he doesn't even investigate anything himself, but you know, I can overlook that, I guess. It's solid overall. Like, it's a perfectly enjoyable detective mystery show. Like, it doesn't play into any bigger picture or anything. There's no like overarching narrative. It's just a bunch of cases, and they've got like a fun dynamic where the main girl and the butler shout at each other a lot. Well, mainly Reiko shouting at him, but him insulting her. Yeah, not much to say about this one. I thought it was perfectly fine. As far as detective shows go, perfectly enjoyable. I don't think I'll come back to this ever. I don't think I'll ever think about it again. But it was fun to watch. So there. Next up is Catch Me at the Ballpark. This is so good. I really like this one. It has no right to be as cute as it is. Like, really heartwarming shit. just all around. Like, this is one of those that's, I guess, sort of like an anthology almost. Like, covers a lot of different characters in the same place, approaching the baseball games in their own ways, right? It's just really heartwarming. It shows how, like, when people come together in support of something, in this case that'd be the baseball team, it can bring people of all backgrounds, personalities together in unison, for a united cause in their show of support. It's just such a cute fucking show, dude. Like, very human. A lot of feel-good stuff from various characters, who are at like different points of their lives. It's just all kinds of really fun little stuff. Like, there's plenty of stuff like that comes to mind. Like, there's that one girl who's married to this sort of veteran player, if you will, and they're having a baby later on. Like in the second half, it's revealed that she's pregnant. Even the budding relationship between Blondie, Rudiko, and the office worker fella, I think is actually surprisingly charming. I thought it was going to be weird at first, but it actually kind of won me over. There's that one vendor girl who is actually, like, by the end, leaves her job at the ball field to become a teacher, which was like a goal she had her whole life. There's plenty of stuff about this that is just really heartwarming. Again, nothing really connected that much, but it does cover like the whole year, and then when it rounds out at the end, it's the start of a new season in the spring or whatever. Just seeing it cover all of that, it's so nice. I really like this one. Again, I grew up playing baseball. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, and I've always liked going to baseball games. I think this is such a delight. Such a fun show, and it does actually catch you in the feels sometimes. For example, there's that guy who is the veteran fella whose wife gets pregnant later on. He had a former best friend who was on the team with him at some point, who went to America, kind of failed in whatever he was trying to do there, and then came back and is now secretly the mascot of the ball team. And they reunite at some point in that, and it kind of catches you off guard a little bit. It's like, oh wow, that's kind of emotional. And a lot of, it just feels very human, this show. So I really like it. I thought it was really fun. Next up is Zatsu Tabi. That's Journey. This is just Touchgrass, the anime. Like, the whole idea is that a manga artist who stays locked in a room all day needs inspiration. So she goes outside to a bunch of different places around Japan and all of a sudden feels way more inspired. 4chan users take notes. But yeah, this falls squarely in the laid-back camp genre of anime. I guess that'd be cute girls going around and doing a whole lot of nothing. And it's totally fine. Characters are fun and silly, the group they have going on, and there's pretty much nothing in particular worth noting about anything that happens. It just exists for fun, and that's totally cool. Like, that's it. They just go around Japan, they have fun, they eat shit. They don't eat shit, they eat food. Real food. But yeah, it's totally mundane. Nothing worth noting. It's totally fine. If this is your thing, you'll like it. Alright, food for the soul. Again, cute girls doing cute things. They actually do a lot of different cute things in this. And I actually think it's pretty funny to boot. The 5 girls are all super quirky in their own ways. They have a fun, goofy dynamic going on. No notes, man. Again, if this is your thing, you'll like it. I actually think the main girl, Mako, is pretty relatable too, especially at the start. She's scared of trying new things and failing at them, and so that she doesn't she's like afraid to step out of her comfort zone. She just wants to spice up her life a little bit, so to speak, right? But she's afraid to take that step. And, upon reuniting with her old friend from elementary school, everything takes a turn for the better with the food culture research club or whatever the fuck. But I actually think Mako's budding friendship with the brunette, Kureya, is that her name? I wrote it down with a question mark, so I think that's her name. I find that one to be particularly sweet. Mako even has a full circle moment because she was super nervous to go into Kureya's little family restaurant by herself in the first episode. And at the last episode, she's practically fearlessly conquering new places solo just to try new food. So it's a good full circle moment for her. Or maybe not full circle, but like a rounded out sort of character arc for her. Yeah, this is just a delight. I like this one more than the previous one. I found that I actually did find myself laughing a few times throughout this. Good stuff. No notes. And last for new shows, Mono. This is quite literally Laid Back Camp. It's the same author. But instead it's about taking photos and shit. And I intentionally stay away from Laid Back Camp for these roundups because I just have absolutely nothing to say about them. But now this is my third show in a row in this category for this season. And like the others, I think it's fun and it's got goofy writing, quirky characters, but absolutely nothing of note happens really. And that's the point, right? It's perfectly fine. They learn about taking pictures and videos in a variety of ways and what pictures and videos can express and how panoramas and time lapses and whatever. It's all a pretty deep rabbit hole in fairness. But again, this is still just cute girls doing cute things at its core. And it adds more silly characters as it goes on. It makes for more digestible pacing. And using all the knowledge and skills they've acquired to make a little movie at the very end is a nice way to round it out. And it's got like a happy ending that touches on how photos capture fond memories of life, and you've got a perfectly adorable little show about the photography club. Again, no notes. Whoever wrote this and Laid Back Camp, they really know what they like. So good for them. Next up, I left my A rank party to help my former students reach the dungeon depths. This is the only 2 core. Well, not the only one, but the only new 2 core on the roundup today. This is actually not bad at all. I think it's perfectly enjoyable, actually. Pretty much everything it does is kind of unremarkable, but fundamentally sound. The world building is totally sensible. Characters really aren't bad at all. They all work well together. They're all diverse, and they're fun to watch. And like the A-rank party that treated the main boy like shit, they actually do get comeuppance, and it's satisfying. But there's also some layers to it, right? Because there's that blonde girl, Jamie, who started feeling bad about their treatment, the party's treatment of Yuke, and gets redemption later. So it's not black and white with his previous party. It's good stuff. And none of the actual story arcs are amazing by any means, or really even all that notable, but they're kept pretty concise for the most part, so nothing drags on for too long. And it even feels like the evolution of the story is pretty sensible and nothing feels out of place. The plot does feel a little like it jumps from spot to spot without much of a connection between each thing, but it does have actual consequences here and there, which makes what they're doing actually feel like it matters. This show does exactly what it's doing, what it wants to do, without faltering and without detouring, right? It just sets up problems and the characters handle them. So like it starts out kind of just okay, but as the show just continues to do its thing totally undaunted, it actually elevates gradually. It gradually elevates itself to good. From unremarkable to actually just good, because it doesn't ever take a detour. It just does its thing. It does the plot. It takes its time with everything. It doesn't feel too rushed or too slow. It resolves a lot of the bigger fights, including the final climactic one with that same prismatic fucking torpedo spell or whatever the fuck it's called from Yuke, which is kind of dumb and not really creative. But other than that, I think it's a perfectly enjoyable fantasy harem show. I like pretty much all the women. They don't feel like they take up space or anything, which is already an achievement for a harem show. This one's kind of a winner. I'm surprised it went for 24 episodes, and I'm also surprised season 2 got announced. But it was good. I did like it for what it was. All right, moving on to sequels. Windbreaker Season 2. Thematically, this was better than Season 1. Visually, this was worse than Season 1. Not by a lot, but I didn't feel like the fights were quite as cool as they were in Season 1. And, namely among the thematic improvements, maybe improvements is the wrong word, right? But Tsubaki is a character absolutely worth noting. They, he, however you want to call them, everyone's different and allowed to express themselves however they want, right? Interpret Tsubaki however you want to. I think it's kind of up to you. I won't make up your mind for you. To me, even if they are male presenting, they are still allowed to have feminine, a feminine vibe. Even if they go by a he would still be allowed to be all liking makeup, lipstick, and fawning over a dude. That's totally fine. It doesn't matter. It's all up to the individual and how they want to live. And that's why I think Tsubaki gets across. And the backstory with them is when the older couple that they meet early on in their life, that helps them become more confident in themselves. I think it's actually a good backstory. It's really heartwarming. And speaking of the old couple, the sort of it's really like it's sad, but it's also heartwarming. The stuff that Tsubaki has Sakura, Nide, and Suo help with, like just helping the old man get back on his feet after his wife passes away. It's nice. It's a good change of pace for Sakura. Like that's kind of what helps him learn throughout that, and then eventually as it goes into the next part of it with, you know, on the, it's not the pleasure district really, but you know, whatever part of the city that is, Sakura learns to that just fighting purely to prove your strength, or to prove that you're allowed to be, really, because that's how he'd always been. He doesn't have to do that anymore, and like he realized that he comes to terms with the fact that he does like the company and the friends he's made at Beaufordine, and fighting to protect them instead of just fighting for the sake of fighting is perfectly fine for him, and he's totally allowed to be their friend. And it's a good, solid development arc for Sakura. Like, you know, his strength, coming to terms with that, his strength doesn't determine his value, all that. Like, you know, so many people help him realize that throughout the course of this season, especially. And there's a lot of other stuff too. Like, I think the guy who led I guess they're not really mercenaries, but the guys who went to capture the girl from, I forget her name, but the singer girl. The guy with the weird bangs who led the charge and likes games and all that. I think his coming around is quite cool too. It's again, a lot of very different perspectives from different characters in Windbreaker, which is really cool. But yeah, this was strong. I really like, again, Windbreaker's really, really good. I like what this season did. Really expanded on the world in a good way. And seeing Sakura, how he's changed since the beginning, is really, really nice too. Good stuff. Next up is Go Loser Ranger Season 2. This shit is still fucking insane. Both Windbreaker and Loser Ranger, I read the manga since last year when their first seasons ended. I don't even know what to say about this one. It is beautifully chaotic. You know, as D especially unravels more of the mystery behind the Rangers and the monsters, it just gets progressively more insane. And even the introduction of the Monster Protection Society adds a huge wrench into the mix, which is, it was already insane, and then it just goes even more crazy. I do feel like it's hard to keep up with sometimes, but if you do keep up with it and like kind of, again, make that conscious effort, I think I mentioned this the last time I talked about the show, you can't just watch this idly. You kind of got to be on your game watching this show to digest everything. But if you do follow everything, I think it's crazy fun and weird and just a barrel of laughs, but also simultaneously pretty dang emotionally compelling. Like, there's a lot of interesting factors that we see unfold here. Like everything with Chidori is really cool. You know, from the school arc to when the end, and even in the in-between part where D visits his house, makes him question his motivations, makes D question his motivations. Crazy shit. The school arc at the start, right, where they do the repeating day or whatever, is crazy to see in the anime. We learn about, you know, when D Red, right? And then Red turns out he's fine. There's like, there's a what the fuck factor about that. Oh my, what's going on? How did that happen? The kaijus or whatever they're calling them running rampant. There's clones of Suzukiri in a lab somewhere. And some of it, I think, is intentionally not meant to make perfect sense to us, especially at this point, if you're not reading the manga, right? There's a lot of it that doesn't quite add up yet. So, and that's intentional, I totally think. I think it's probably worth mentioning the last episode or two feel a little bit rushed so that it can get to where it wants to leave off. I don't remember that part being as rushed in the manga, but maybe that's just me. Is all kinds of crazy shit being revealed to us in this season. And it's a little hard to take in, but if you do digest everything, it is batshit crazy and a lot of fun. Next up is Aharen is Indecipherable, Season 2. I honestly don't remember when the last season of this was, but I know I covered it on a Roundup. This is still cute. It's still silly, and I still actually think it's funny. I remember saying I actually was surprised that I thought this show was funny, and I actually still am surprised that I think it's funny. This is actually kind of one of those rare gems that just knows exactly what it is and has known from the start, and it stays in its lane and builds on itself really naturally well. Like, it's very innocently enjoyable. The humor lands still, and the characters and the dynamic between everyone is still good fun. I think it even finds a really solid ending point that hits all the right emotional notes with, all of the enjoying your youth and finding meaning in your life and connections with friends and true love, etc. It hits all the right emotional points there. Again, a good landing point for it. It didn't need to have any more than this, and it's done, and now we can move on. It knew exactly what it did. It did its thing and then left. That's how all anime should be. All right, Shoshimin series, How to Become Ordinary, Season 2. I did think this was better than Season 1. I was sort of invested. It was better, definitely, that this season had just 2 big mysteries instead of a few smaller ones. Remember that sense of detachment I mentioned when I talked about GQuuuuuX earlier? This series has it too. There's a line from Osanai around the middle of this season that I think sums up the feeling quite well. She was talking to that one journalist guy, and she said something like, "I thought you looked kind of like an idiot, but then again, I didn't have much in the way of expectations for you to begin with." And that's about right, She felt completely detached from what was happening right in front of her. Again, I mentioned this in the last time I talked about this. Animation and storyboarding are still excellent. Voice acting is great. It just builds the world around the characters really nicely, using establishing shots and stuff. But all that said, it's still pretty contrived in my opinion. It's a slice of life show at the end of the day, right? But the slice of life is built upon the mystery solving. So that means there's about an equal blend of scenes that give very subtle hints about the mystery they're supposed to be unraveling, that you're supposed to read between the lines for, but then also scenes that are completely mundane and only serve to give you doses of the series' overly quirky Redditor-esque writing style, or to contribute to the half-hearted establishment of bizarre character motivations and relationships. So some scenes you're meant to read between the lines, and some you're not, and it just feels, it's just the weird, quirky writing of this show, to sum it all up. It's sometimes hard to tell which is which. Now, I'm not saying I don't see how someone would really like the show, because I do. I think a lot of the acclaim it's gotten among folks who've watched it is well earned. And maybe it is because I watch 30 plus anime a season, but if I have to pause for minutes at a time, probably multiple times an episode, just to have a chance at deducing the mystery without the characters doing it for me, I ain't doing all that. But even besides that, the characters don't really do anything for me. They feel bland to me. The writing is good, even if it feels like it's written entirely by Redditors who theorycraft BS about anime twice a week. And the mysteries this time around don't require a 2-episode long explanation to understand. So I guess this one's a win, overall. Not in my personal book, but I'm just glad it's over. Bye Bye Earth, Season 2. What the fuck? Again, this is way too fast-paced. You can't digest anything. Not that I even know what's going on at any point, but, Even from last season, it just does things without ever establishing anything first or reason why I should care. Like, you can't just go forward with a plot that makes no sense, by the way, without giving me a reason to care first. And it's like the weirdest plot of all time. And then I have no reason to care about it. Because I guess there's no clear-cut goal, really. Like, it's just Belle going on a journey or whatever. She's trying to discover the secrets behind the world. She does. They're not good secrets. They're dumb. I had to Google it. Apparently, the moon was terraformed by an AI based on its understanding of humanity. And Belle is like the singularity. Like an exception to the AI's rule. And there's a point where, towards the end of the season, where I guess Belle fights the hostile part of the AI, which is trying to oust her from the world, but she just fights the hostile part, because even though the world is an AI creation, she stays in it at the end, and goes on a journey through the world the AI created. So it's not like she broke it down to discover a true reality or anything. She's just still on the terraformed moon, AI terraformed moon, doing weird shit that doesn't matter. And all of the conflict basically just comes down to Belle swinging her sword at it. Whatever the problem is. Because her sword is super special or whatever, and it talks or something. And the ultimate, like, the climactic fight scene is against that weird demi-human guy who tried to get into Belle's pants at the end of last season. Who becomes like the vessel for the AI or something. I don't like this one. I don't. It makes no sense, and it's dumb. And not in a good way dumb. Bad way dumb. Alright. Our Last Crusade, or The Rise of a New World, Season 2. This was pretty fun, actually. I was fuzzy on the details from last season. But I did find this one enjoyable nonetheless. Goes really deep into this story arc it's got going on. It really feels like for this adaptation, they meticulously trimmed the fat from the novels and cut it down to as concise as they could make the plot while making sure we can still follow along and keeping all the fan service too. It kind of feels like it leaves the characters, you know, even as it goes on, in a weird place where all the plot is just happening and they don't have many, if any, chances at all to just assess their situation or just hang out idly. And even when they do talk about their plans or whatever, it always just boils down to that one other fellow that's not Iska going like, I already know everything, let's go. Here's exactly what we need to do. No deliberation necessary. So while I do find the sort of quick on its feet pacing of this one good in that sense, I do think it suffers a bit for that same reason in another sense. This is one of those shows where I talk a lot about interregional conflicts, specifically between the Empire, of like magic super soldiers or whatever, looking to expand, and the independent sovereignty of pureblood witches, or astral mages, or whatever you want to call them, who the Empire wants. And at least in my opinion, none of that talk really hits home the way it should. Like, it doesn't fully register, at least with me, and I think I realized why. It's because I have no real idea what the two sides are like at a very fundamental level. Like, obviously there's plenty of scenes that involve the Imperial higher-ups making decisions, who, by the way, we have no names for, or really any solid motivations to put to them, along with scenes that showcase the three major families of the sovereignty. But we know pretty much jack squat about the actual normal-ass people on either side. Do they or don't they support or believe in the efforts of their side, or at least vie against the other side? Like, what's the consensus of the public? Do they actually want what the war efforts are trying to gain? Do they think that will benefit them? You know? And like, what does the capital of the Empire look like? Where is it on a map? Because I can't visualize these kinds of things. So none of the strategizing or formal talks about moves either side is making really land the way they should. It just sounds like they're saying things, and I can't really digest it. Like, give me scenes that actually show what they're talking about. For example, near the end, the masked dude, who I guess is part of one of the sovereignty's royal families, claims that the Empire would want a pure-blood witch not as a hostage, but rather to experiment on and research, which might as well be speculation on his part, but it's not entirely without merit because it makes sense if the Empire has no pure-blood astral mages or whatever, or we're witches. But we never see people on the Imperial side say anything like that. So none of it feels like it connects. And that's just one example, you know? Like I get there's a lot of plot and talking to get through, but when it's all just kind of thrown at you and you just have to take their word for it, it just doesn't work as well as it could, in my opinion. Other than that, though, I did think this was good. The characters are okay. I don't really have any significant praise for them or the way they're written or handled, but they work in this plot pretty well and fit exactly where they need to be. But, you know, they're absolutely there to service the plot, not the other way around. And like the scheming behind the scenes of the Alice's older sister and whichever family it was that helped her. It's all fairly interesting stuff, which kind of makes them boring, but it's fine. I do like what Alice and Iska have going on, so fair enough. Could have been better, could have been worse. Alright, I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level, Season 2. Kind of like last season, I thought this was perfectly fine. It's just very cozy, very easy to watch. Really not much to comment on here, I think. It's just feel-good fun, you know? It's still got the same silliness, fun writing, goofy characters, whole shebang. It expands on the previous season, not too much or too little, with new characters, and the shenanigans never feel stale or anything. While watching last season, I found it was so easy to just fall into this really comfy pace of just watching it and taking it in. It just immediately establishes itself and roots itself so nice and cozy where it wants to be in the no-stakes cozy fantasy genre of anime. It just really works so effortlessly. You know, this show isn't really my thing. I do like to get invested typically in my anime. But this absolutely accomplishes what it sets out to do just by being silly, harmless fun. And in that sense, it's very well done, right? The voice acting, I think, is great too. No notes. Just good, harmless fun. Very innocent. I like it. Alright, The Apothecary Diaries, Season 2. This is a 2-core and a sequel. There have been times on these roundups where I've been like, oh man, I don't need to drone on and on about this show. Everybody knows how good it is. And then I drone on and on about it. I actually am not going to say much about The Apothecary Diaries, mostly because I actually don't want to spoil it. I actually found this season to be better than Season 1, in my opinion. I just think everything it does feels more connected. Like, you know, almost everything that happens from the start of the season until the end. It hasn't ended at the time of recording this, but it's basically over. It's one episode out. Basically everything that happens ties into like the story that is ultimately told with the Shi clan. Because in the first half, it seems super normal Apothecary Diaries type thing. Super just, you know, slow pace, normal like what you'd expect. But then it just builds this really compelling, emotionally compelling story about the Shi clan. I do think it's a little convoluted sometimes. Like maybe you have to sort of stretch your imagination to get everything that happens. But if you are like really paying attention, I don't think that should be a problem. Like again, I don't want to spoil anything, but Shisui, I don't think I would have predicted. Like even if I didn't watch 30 plus anime a season, and I was just watching this, I don't know if I would have predicted the Shisui thing, right? I just didn't give it that much thought. I do think Mao Mao and Jinshi as like a romance feels kind of awkwardly middling here. And you know, Mao Mao is very closed off to romance, which I get. It makes sense for her character. Yeah, I don't know. The romance in this really isn't why I watch Apothecary Diaries or why I would want to, but man, is such an emotionally compelling roller coaster that this one builds kind of out of nowhere. Just really, really good stuff. Like, man, I don't know who wouldn't like the Apothecary Diaries. I think it's really, really strong. And of course, visuals look stunning still. It's crazy. I was really surprised at how like properly invested I got in everything that was going on. And you know, Shisui's dance, let's just call it that. Oh man, chills. again, it does feel a little convoluted, especially when it comes to like Shisui's mom and what happened with her dad and Sweden, whatever the fuck her name is. The girl Shisui calls older sister. Yeah, this was really, really good. Really good. Watch the Apothecary Diaries, man. It's fucking really fucking good. I love Mao Mao. She's fantastic. And that is all for this season. I actually got through this in less time than I thought, and now I have to go to work. I'm going to be up for like 30 hours before I go to sleep. But next season, we got like Gachiakta. Fucking Dress Up Darling is back. I'm mostly excited about Gachiakta, but Sakamoto Days, mostly Gachiakta though. Oh man, I'm hyped for that.